The City of Tacoma's Historic Preservation Office, in association with Pretty Gritty Tours, presents Tacoma Noir.
Ray Rook opened his eyes. He couldn't see much. The room was dimly lit by a soft light in the distance. His face was pressed against the floor. It was cold, damp. An overpowering scent of mildew and ammonia filled his nostrils. Strangely, though, he felt euphoric, like a weight was lifted off his chest. A pair of rough hands lifted him off the floor and threw him into a shoddy wooden chair. Ray reached inside his jacket to pull loose the Colt, but he felt a rough hand slap him across the face hard enough to send him flying off the chair. Somehow, Ray just felt giddy. As the mysterious figure hauled him up off the floor again, Ray continued to laugh. A voice with a rough Italian accent spoke from the dark corner of the room. Ray thought they might be underground, but where?
Hit him again, Pat. I don't think he's got the message yet.
This time a second voice, from the giant holding Ray, helped pull him into focus. He must have stood 6'8" and lifted Ray up off his feet before throwing him back into the chair so hard it sounded like it might splinter on sight.
I think the dope's hitting him too hard, Aldo.
The dope, of course. Ray's clouded mind started to slowly crystallize. The smell of ammonia, the damp, cool floor, the lack of light. They were in an opium den. Underground. Where? Ray tried to feel for his Colt again, but it was still missing. Where's the woman?
I don't think you get the way this works, pal. We ask questions. You talk. You don't talk. Well then, Pat gets to play.
To drive the point home, the large man hit Ray again. Ray Rook laughed a little, the thick cloud of opium taking the edge off each blow. You know, it's funny.
You hear that, Pat? He thinks it's funny. Why don't you help him with the punchline?
I'd love to.
He struck Ray again. Ray had to cling to the man to keep himself from flying backwards. As he did, he clumsily reached inside his jacket pocket. Sure enough, his knuckle dusters were still there. He tried to clear his mind enough to get ready for the fight. The giant set Ray back neatly in the chair and stood looming over him.
Now, why don't you tell me what's so funny?
You know, she looks just like you, the woman I'm looking for.
Oh yeah? What's her name?
You mean to tell me you don't know your own mother's name?
You want me to knock his teeth out, boss?
The shorter man came forward towards Ray out of the shadows and snapped open a blade. Ray reached inside his pocket and looped his fingers through the brass knuckles. 2 shots rang out in that instant, and the shorter man slumped to the ground. The giant turned.
Aldo! What's happening?
The next sound was a sharp blast and the big man hitting the floor. Ray's ears were ringing, but his vision had adjusted to the darkness of the underground vault. There, standing in the doorway of a tunnel, was Agent Rachel Parker, snub-nosed revolver smoking in her hand. There was a trickle of blood behind her ear where Ray assumed they had clubbed her as well.
These guys never think to pat down a woman.
That's a mistake. You only get to make once, it seems.
Where are we?
Ray Rook shakily got up from the wooden chair and began looking around. All along the walls were rough wooden crates marked tuna. There was a soft red glow coming from down a corridor that sloped slightly downwards. The pungent aroma of opium drifted up from that direction. At his feet, the 2 men lay sprawled across the floor. Ray started going through the clothes of the 2 dead men. Inside the jacket of the one called Aldo, he found his Colt and replaced it neatly inside his own coat. He felt around a bit more and found a pair of women's stockings, a book of matches, a brass key, and a revolver, both of which he pocketed. I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect we're in the vaulted section below Whiskey Row. I'm voting we don't stick around to find out too much more. I've got questions for a friend of mine. And Parker? Thank you.
You don't need to thank me, Ace. Just try not to die so easily.
She smiled at him, and Ray felt the effects of the opium a little sweeter for a second. Together, they pushed down the corridor and came to a thick wooden door at the top of a short staircase. Ray took out his Colt and slowly pushed open the door. He was assaulted by the heavy, acrid stench of what appeared to be a printing press. There were machines for printing and some for binding, but the chemical odor hit him hard. Ray looked around and saw all the tools of a successful print house. Littered throughout were stacks of legal documents. Large amounts of ink, the smell of boiled linseed oil, reams of paper, large amounts of graphite, and shelves of letter and design type. The cool light of day was coming in through the window, but the shop seemed closed. Ray moved over to the main desk in the corner. It was perfectly bare. Not a single item left out or on top of it. Ray tried one of the drawers, but it was locked. He reached inside his pocket and fished out the key he had just taken off the dead man in the tunnel below. It fit, and when he opened the drawer, he found a black ledger, several tuna cans, and neatly ordered papers. Agent Parker joined Ray at the desk and took one of the tuna cans as Ray continued sorting through the drawer. Rachel turned the key on the top, and the can opened to reveal a sticky brown mass of opium.
I knew it. They've been bringing in more than whiskey out of Victoria.
This related to your case? Agent Parker nodded.
I haven't been able to prove anything because every time I submit an appeal, the legal crew waits the appropriate amount of time and then tells me that it won't check out. I know they aren't even looking at it until I have ironclad evidence. This might be the ticket I need. How long were we out?
Ray checked his watch. Must have only been a few hours. Come on, I know this place. We aren't far from my office.
I need to go check in with my superiors. They will need to know about this.
Ray looked at the woman. He needed a cup of coffee. Probably several cups of coffee. And frankly, maybe something a little stronger. I'm gonna have a quick look around and then I need to go talk to a man about some magic. Ray Rook handed Agent Parker a card he pulled from his jacket pocket. This is my office. Get in touch with my secretary. She'll know how to find me.
Where are you going next?
Something's not sitting right with me about our ghostly encounter last night. I think I need to talk to an old friend. Agent Parker took the tuna can full of opium and headed out the front door and onto the street. She turned back once and smiled, and then was gone. Ray picked up a phone set on a desk in the middle of the room. Yeah. Connect me with the police, will you? Yeah, I'll wait. This is Ray Rook. Tell Detective Byrne that he needs to get down to 726 Pacific. There's something he needs in the basement. I left him 2 packages from Vito Catone. Oh, tell him to bring the squad. Ray hung up the receiver and waited for the police to arrive. While he stood there, he went back to the main desk at the rear of the room and went through all the drawers. There was the black ledger in the bottom drawer that he flipped through. Inside were several drafts of illustrations, a detailed account of monies in and out, and in the back what looked like shipment times and volumes. They were labeled fish, but Ray figured if it was anything like what he and Agent Parker had just found, it'd be worth more than a tin of albacore. He knew what he needed to do next. Ray went back to the basement and followed the tunnel. As he descended deeper into the vaulted section below the sidewalk, he moved through what looked like a heavily used but currently vacated opium den. Several makeshift cots lined the walls, and dim electric lights with gossamer red cloth draped over them gave off a weak light. At the end of the vaulted corridor, Ray came to a dead end. At his feet there was only a round metal cover over what he assumed might be a cistern. He lifted up the cover and flicked on the flashlight he kept in his coat pocket. Sweeping the edges of the cistern with the beam, he confirmed that the chamber was dry, and along the wall it had been tunneled out. Ray Rook slowly lowered himself inside the small room, maybe 6 feet in diameter and 5 feet deep. He pierced the black of the makeshift tunnel with his light and found that it sloped downward and was big enough to walk through. Ray entered the tunnel and went deeper and deeper until he eventually came to a room, more of a small cave that had been widened out than a tunnel. The walls had sturdy workbenches covered in tools and grease. In the center of the largest table stood a partially disassembled V-shaped engine. It was surrounded by loose parts, heavy brass nuts and bolts the size of chestnuts, pistons, and a tin labeled Lubriplate Marine Lube. Ray took the lid off and examined the thick petroleum jelly. At the far end of the chamber was a heavy iron door. In the upper middle of the door, there was a thick glass portal. Ray could see gray daylight coming in through it. He spun the large iron handle in the middle and swung open the door. Water lapped at his feet. To his immediate left, there was a rusted iron ladder that extended up to what looked like a rough timber trestle. He was under a dock. It spread out far enough in front of him that he couldn't make out which dock. The tide was out, but rising rapidly. He sealed the large door behind him. By high tide, it would be completely submerged. Clever smugglers. Ray climbed up the short ladder and found himself beneath a hatch. With a sharp shove, it gave way and swung open to reveal the warehouse he had first met Rachel Parker in. Pulling himself up and out, he took note of the barren warehouse in the dull light of a December day. He felt inside his coat to ensure the ledger he had pocketed was still there. Next, he took out his Colt, dropped out the clip. All the rounds were still there. If you can't be lucky, you might as well be armed. He rammed the clip back in place and made up his mind about what he had to do. Ray walked the docks and arrived at the edge of Baker Dock. Along the waterfront were all of Tacoma's most common sights to welcome sailors ashore. As Navy boys came off the Lexington, they passed the solid line of Tacomans looking to get a tour of the majestic ship that had come to save them. Bright streamers and pamphlets showcasing the finest dining and dances rained like confetti down upon them. The pious preachers of the city circled like vultures over the carrion, cawing loudly to the sailors about the pitfalls of sin that they might encounter in the city. One block in were the very pitfalls they'd been warned about. The back alley of Whiskey Row had some of the working girls common to a port town like Tacoma. They were milling about the sailors and making offers of their own. While all the preachers were talking about damnation, each of these girls was promising heaven. Ray approached one of the girls. Her tight bob framed dark eye makeup and her skirt was dangerously north of her knees for weather like this.
Hey, mister, you looking for a port to come ashore?
I'm looking for some information.
I bet I could teach you all kind of things you ain't never learned before. What's your name, fella?
Ray Rook. Curious if anybody unusual has been down here with you ladies this week. The girl screwed up her face with a look of mock disappointment.
You a cop? You want to interrogate me upstairs, hun?
Ray opened his coat and revealed the Colt 1911 pressed against his chest. He reached inside and passed the pistol to his billfold. Taking out $2, he offered them to the young woman, who hastily stuffed them inside her own pocket and looked around.
Listen, there's just the sailors these days, and we're all plenty happy to see 'em here. The streets are brighter and safer. Frankly, it's bringing too much of the wrong element down here, if you ask me.
The wrong element?
Upper Hill girls trying to poach our Johns. Good ladies that ain't got no business being down here.
Any of them stand out?
Real pretty one, dark eyes, always wearing black. Keeps coming down and taking all the good business. All the clean boys follow her around.
Got a name?
Got $1?
Ray Rook took out another $1 and gave it to the woman.
She's some sort of mind reader, a ghost talker. Sally Mae, one block up, said the woman knew things about her dead mother that no one else could have known. Sailors pass us right by when they see a pretty face like that promising wild adventures. I don't mess with that evil. You don't open the door to the devil is what I always learned. She brings the ghosts with her.
The ghosts? The girl looked around, suddenly deadly serious.
Sometimes, after she comes down here, we girls start to see 'em. Sailors, Johns, guys show up, but they ain't like normal guys. They don't have any faces. You see one of them staring from the shadows, and then they're gone, like smoke.
She shivered, and Ray knew it had nothing to do with the cold. Thanks. You've been very helpful. Keep your nose clean, kid. Ray Rook turned and continued down the alley. As he walked, the young woman called after him, but Ray didn't look back. Ray Rook stopped into the Coast Guard office on his way back to look up the tide table. A woman at the front desk smiled at him.
Hello, sir. Welcome. Do you have an appointment?
No, but I'm hoping you can help me. Ray Rook took out his badge and flashed it to the young woman sitting at the desk.
Certainly, sir.
I need to look at the incident logs. Were there any unusual events on the night of December 18th? Anywhere from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. I need to see a tide table too, please.
Just a moment.
The secretary got up and went over to the main desk. There was an on-duty Coast Guard officer there. She leaned close to him to speak, and the officer looked up from his logbook to examine Ray. The officer got up and came over.
What's this about?
I'm looking into an incident on the evening of December 18th. It may have to do with the security of the USS Lexington. Ray produced his badge again and let the officer look at it. He examined it like he was looking for a prize inside. After pawing at it for a moment like an animal in the zoo, he handed it back with a splash of disappointment on his mug.
Let me get the logbook.
He returned to his desk and retrieved a behemoth of a leather ledger, with thick pages scrawled across in meticulous penmanship. He set it down in front of Ray Rook and stood next to him, observing his every move.
We've doubled our patrols with the Lexington in port. I can assure you nothing and nobody is going anywhere near that ship while we're on duty.
Ray scanned the pages. Reports of vessels coming into port, leaving, weather, lights spotted, notes on cargo. Then, there it was. December 18th, 6:15 p.m. In bold black ink. Small fishing vessel spotted near shore. No running lights. Hailed vessel. Vessel fled at rapid clip. Shots fired by officers. Vessel ran out of sight. What can you tell me about this? The coastie looked at the logbook.
Probably bootleggers. The Catone outfit, most likely. We can't pin it on them yet, but they've been running a boat out of here faster than anything I've ever seen. Loud, too. Flies on the water. More like an airplane than a boat.
Ray looked back at the log, then flipped open the tide table. 6 p.m., December 18th. It was the lowest tide. He grabbed the ledger he had confiscated from the printing press earlier and flipped it open as well. Scanning the columns, he noticed they were regular like clockwork. Every night, a shipment labeled cardstock paper reams was coming in until December 16th, the night the Lexington was scheduled to leave Bremerton and begin the journey to Tacoma. The columns looked suspiciously bare since then. Thanks, Ace. You've helped a ton. Ray turned to leave and heard the bewildered Coast Guard officer calling after him, but he made straight for downtown. Ray arrived at his office and Betty was sitting in the foyer, typing away at the mill. She stopped dead when Ray walked in.
Ray! What happened?
You know me, Betty. Always making new friends.
Detective Byrne called. He said you left 2 men dead in a basement. He wants to talk to you, Ray.
Have him stop in if he needs to, or tell him the usual. I didn't plug those 2 juice joint hatchet men, but they had it coming either way. They were with the Catone outfit. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from a few more of them pretty soon.
Ray, you look like you need a coffee.
Betty got up and went to set the percolator on.
And Ray, take a shower. You smell like a fish house.
Always a doll, Betty. Bring in that Joe and ring the news hawk from the ledger, will you? I need to know about some city accounts. Ray looked down at his desk as he entered his office. Betty had set down the morning newspaper for him. Splashed across the title page was the headline, "Local Ensign Found Dead in Water." Ray skimmed the article. Ensign First Class Robert Henderson found dead floating in the water late last night. Ray had to read it twice. Robert Henderson. Betty somehow managed to get the coffee ready and bring Ray the receiver with the ledger reporter on the line at the same time. Ray lit a cigarette and took the phone. Hey, Sam, yeah? I'm gonna drop in and look at some of your books. You've been doing the reading and research on the city council members this re-election season, right? I need to know what you've dug up on large-scale donations. Uh-huh. I'll be right over. Toasting Betty, Ray Rook downed his coffee and stood up. He handed her the black ledger and kissed her on the cheek. Lock this up, will you, doll? We're gonna need it to put the screws in some bad men, okay?
Ray, where are you going?
I'm gonna go talk to a dead man. Ray Rook went down the street and past the streetcar station on A, where the body of Ensign Jimmy Ashcraft had been found. He could see down the hill to where the Lexington was docked, her engines chugging away, pumping life back into the listless body of Tacoma. He went up by the police station and into City Hall. The proud clock tower spearing the slate-gray belly of the December sky. Inside was a dizzying whir of activity. Typewriters drummed a war tune as the city marched onward through disaster. In the main hall, a collection of men in suits gathered together. On the edge, Ray saw the man he was looking for, a local reporter named Sam Martin. He seemed to be engaged in a vibrant discussion with Tacoma's temporary mayor, James Newbegin. Mayor Newbegin was standing at the center of the group, looking like a worn and weary general during a long campaign. Next to him was council member Walter Baldwin. Ray's reporter volleyed a question at the mayor.
Mayor Newbegin, how can any of us expect stability in the city when half of the city council members are missing?
They are not missing. They've simply not been attending the meetings regularly.
Do you think that's because they have no confidence in your leadership?
I suspect that's a question for them. However, I have no reason to believe that this has anything to do with me. As you know, I did not ask for this job, but unlike other mayors in the recent months, I am actually doing the work.
The group of huddled reporters collectively laughed.
Will the Lexington pull out now that this string of murders has put pressure on them?
Now we will have none of that, Sam. 2 dead sailors isn't a conspiracy. As deeply unfortunate as it is, and I know we all grieve the loss of these fine servicemen, you well know that any port can be dangerous. There's nothing to say that either man was murdered. The police, I can assure you, are all following up on these unfortunate accidents. Our relationship with the Lexington is remarkably strong, and we are very proud of our unbreakable bond.
Walter Baldwin took this moment to chime in.
The Lexington being here is one of our greatest achievements as a city, and there is no reason to believe that she will abandon us in our hour of need. I have personally guaranteed the U.S. Navy will keep Captain Birion here until the dam can provide power again.
Mayor Newbegin, can we expect you to campaign for this job in the upcoming election?
My intention has always been nothing more than to fulfill my duty to this city. I have been working tirelessly every evening this week into the early hours of dawn with council members like Walter Baldwin to ensure that the next election will be smooth. We don't need any more caustic characters like Melvin Tennant to waste any of our collective time with parlor games just to disappear in a fit when he doesn't get what he wants. Now, gentlemen, speaking of work, I have much to do. No more questions for today.
With that, the mayor of Tacoma turned and left down the hall, with his entourage stumbling after him like dry leaves trailing behind a fast car. Walter Baldwin nodded at Ray Rook before he turned to take his leave as well. Ray Rook approached Sam Martin. Hey, Sam. You got the details on the campaign contributions?
Ray, I don't know how you get tangled in these messes.
It's my magnetic personality, I'm sure.
I've been trying to pull those records for weeks. With the new mayor in charge and Lady Lex in town, the usual push and pull of vice and money is changing. We have been trying to figure out what the next move will be, but the books are locked down.
What do you mean?
The legal office for City Hall has been out for a week now. They've been investigating a local printing press as a point for smuggling, and the chief counsel for the city has that place shut down until he can sort through the case files. I had a meeting with Chief Counsel Roberts a couple nights ago, but he wasn't in. His secretary didn't know where he was. It sounds like he's been spending a lot of time with this clairvoyant in town.
What time did you drop in on him?
Around 6 p.m. on Wednesday.
Ray took out a cigarette and lit it. He needed a drink. Sam, you've been a tremendous help.
What are you talking about, Ray? I didn't get you anything.
You've given me everything, Sam. Ray Rook tipped his hat, and with the trail of smoke from his cigarette billowing behind, he charged back out into the bone-dry streets of Tacoma, looking like a locomotive of justice heading down the line. Ray Rook had gone home to his modest apartment. He came inside the room and took a bottle of Atherton whiskey and poured himself a glass. He downed it in one before heading to clean himself up. He knew he'd have a long night ahead if his suspicions were correct, and they almost always were. He showered, dressed, and was tightening his tie when there was a knock at the door. He left the Colt on the dining table in his small kitchenette as he went to look through the peephole. There, standing in the hallway beyond the door, was Ada Kincaid. Ray opened the door. Miss Kincaid, won't you come in? Like a chill October breeze, she drifted into his room. Her black dress was low-cut, framing a dazzling display of pearls. She removed her coat when she entered, and the impossibly soft-looking silk seemed to pull the light from the single lamp in his room to her. Her presence brought on the hush of a forest after the first snowfall, and his senses seemed muted and dull. The only bright spot were her dark eyes with their little firework display of reflected light.
Good evening, Mr. Rook. I hope you don't mind, but I didn't get a chance to speak with you last evening like I had hoped I would.
I'm sorry about that. Party was a real knockout. Ray watched her face to see if there were any tells. She remained as smooth and unreadable as a Roman sculpture. How'd you find me?
Mr. Rook, finding people is what I do. I'm especially talented with finding those who don't want to be found.
What makes you think I didn't want to be found?
You've been avoiding me from the moment we met.
Can I get you a drink? Ada Kincaid let her gaze wash over Ray Rook as she nodded slowly.
I would love one.
Ray moved to position the table between himself and Ada Kincaid as he found a single wine glass in the cupboard and filled it with whiskey for the woman. He handed her the glass, and she closed the gap between them. She removed her long satin gloves and set them down by her coat near the front door. Since you're here, maybe you can help me with something.
I would love to be of service to you.
She paused.
After all, I'm here to solve this mystery as well.
You ever come across anything like the card found on the dead ensign in the alley? The skeleton, coming out of the coffin.
It's the Revenant. The animated dead said to return to haunt the living. Many in the spiritualist movement consider it to be sacred.
And you?
I'm simply a gateway for the dead to speak to the living. I avail my talents to them so that people can find closure or peace. Those who would use their talents for gain consider the Revenant to be special.
Is that how you got pulled into this? Just wanting to help?
Counsel Roberts insisted that I be involved. He's seen me work previously. He knows what I'm capable of. After the seance that evening, he came back for me. Once he heard that that poor boy had been found, he knew that I would be able to help.
After the dead told you his name?
Rebecca spoke his name very clearly. Tell me something, Mr. Rook.
What's that?
Why are you so intent on avoiding me? Is it because you still fear what you've left behind?
She took a beat.
Or those you've lost?
I've never been known to avoid anything that's bad for me. Ray Rook took out a cigarette, offered one to Ada Kincaid, and lit both of them when she accepted. She moved closer to Ray, and he could feel the heat of her now. She always moved so noiselessly he had begun to wonder if she was a ghost herself. Ada tilted her head for a moment like she was listening to a song only she could hear. Ray felt a shiver go down his spine like a wild animal being stalked in a lonely field.
Do you still blame yourself? You should know, they don't blame you.
Who?
The ones you lost in France. They're glad you made it, even though they didn't.
Ray could feel the icy sensation in his veins pulse through him. The weak light bulb in his room flickered. A strong gust of wind battered the window. Ada Kincaid sipped slowly from her glass as she pushed even closer to Ray Rook, her hand skimming across his chest like a stone skipped across a pond.
They don't want you to carry that burden anymore. The other Black Lions.
Ray took a deep drag of his cigarette and couldn't tell if the flush of heat in his lungs was from the cigarette or the woman in front of him. I don't think you know anything about that.
You were a good soldier. You still are. I think you blame yourself for the loss of those men overseas. I think you blame yourself for the ensign that was killed here last night.
And what makes you think that? He felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up like an electric charge race down his spine. Ada pulled herself even closer to him. Flashes of a life long ago on the shores of France came back to him. She leaned in close to him and he could feel her tilt her chin up to whisper in his ear. The air in the room felt cold and still. The bulb in the lamp flickered again.
He told me. Ensign Roberts spoke to me. He said it wasn't your fault. This long line of men waiting outside your door, I'll know you tried your best. They don't blame you for living when they couldn't.
Ray Rook turned his head away from Ada Kincaid as he felt her lips brush close to his. Outside his second-floor window, it looked like a man was standing below the flickering street lamp. He looked up at Ray, and beneath the brim of his hat, his features were smudged or gone. Ray couldn't tell. He was faceless. Ray blinked and moved closer to the window to see. Ray thought he saw the man point right at him, and then the shots burst through the glass and the lights went out. This has been part 3 of Tacoma Noir. Please join us for the final episode, Rebecca's Tomb. Tacoma Noir is brought to you by the City of Tacoma's Historic Preservation Office and Pretty Gritty Tours.